Well, it's official. After more than a half century operating 35 miles north of New York City, the Indian Point nuclear power plant will shutter its doors by 2021. Entergy, that's the company that owns the plant, making their announcement today. They say the decision was based entirely on market forces and the falling price of energy. Company officials did acknowledge the efforts of the state and environmental groups, all of whom have taken legal steps to block the plant's relicensing or otherwise make the process that much more expensive. But they did stop far short of suggesting that Governor Cuomo deserves credit for the announcement, as he did, listing the IP closure as an example of his leadership in his State of the State address today.
I want to follow up on Gary's question earlier. As you know, Governor Cuomo is, to a certain degree, taking credit for the closure of Indian Point, even to the point where he's added it to his State of the State address. I know that you have said many times that this is more an economic decision than it was anything else, but how would you respond to Governor Cuomo's statements and his positioning on this and seeking political advantage from the closure?
We certainly respect the governor. He's entitled to say what he would like to say. We know what the facts are, and the facts are that we made this decision based on the economics of the plant.
So there. As I said, 20 million people, they live within a 50-mile radius of the plant, making it the most population-dense and most controversial nuclear power plant in the entire country. A point brought home on 9/11 when one of those hijacked jets flew directly over the plant. Andrew, it's the he said at this point. Will it matter at the end of the day? I didn't see this coming. We talked about this forever, and now all of a sudden it will shut its doors. A lot of people saying it's because of me, it's because of what I said. This has to do with the bottom line.
It really does. And you know, Cuomo and the state of New York and Riverkeeper, who is the environmental group who also joined in these suits, did make it more expensive for Entergy to fight for its new license, which they're now going to only have for the next 6 years. But look, the price of energy has been falling in part because of fracking and the explosion of natural gas across the market, so it costs a whole lot less. We're seeing that at the gas pump. We're seeing that all over the place. The real question now, the two big questions: how will New York replace the power? They think they can do it with some streamlining of the system and some other sources that they're looking into. And then how do they make up for the lost jobs, which then equals lost tax revenue?
And how many, this is in Buchanan, New York, for folks who don't know.
It's about 1,000 jobs directly with Entergy and another 1,000 ancillary jobs that'll be impacted by this. And then, of course, the tax receipts going into the local school system and the local municipalities and the county as well. So figuring out how to make up for that lost ground. It's not that dissimilar from, you know, the big manufacturing plant in your town closing down, but that doesn't always go that well for those towns.
It did seem that the Westchester County executive wanted Entergy to say it's because the governor made life impossible for us, but Entergy didn't go there. Clearly, this seems an issue that I would expect next year if Astorino is the gubernatorial candidate for the Republicans again and goes again against Governor Cuomo. This issue will come up at least in this neck of the woods, but people won't be feeling it by then.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because Andrew Cuomo is saying he's responsible for it, and his opponent, perhaps in the Westchester County executive, wants to say you are responsible, but for the loss of jobs, not protecting us in a safety component. And of course, Entergy is not going there, as Andrew talked about. But you know, I think it is going to be really important to see how we deal with this energy issue in New York State and how indeed they replace these jobs, because New York has a huge problem, particularly, this isn't upstate, but particularly as you move upstate, that's 2,000 jobs.
And we've seen the plant shutter before. Years ago when it got red flagged, it used to have the worst safety record in the country before Entergy bought it. But to me, it also brings a bigger issue. If Indian Point can close, after all the fights and the NRC kind of drawn a red line that they wouldn't shut this plant down, what does that say for the future of nuclear energy? I've had a lot of problems with the plant, but it's clean energy by and large. I know there's issues about what seeped into the waters, et cetera, as you can see it right there, in terms of maybe radioactive material. But by and large, nuclear is considered more safe. Dangerous, God forbid, if you have a problem with the plant, but it's clean, at least, energy. Are we seeing the beginning of the end of nuclear power?
Not necessarily, and if we believe the spokesperson for the nuclear plant operator, they made this decision on dollars and cents. This is an older plant, so it's an older technology, and they just didn't want to make the investment.
Are you a fan of nuclear power, or do you think it's more trouble than it's worth?
It depends on how good the nuclear power plant operations can be in terms of dangers and risks versus other renewable, non-fossil fuel-based or other sources of energy.
Now, speaking of governor's State of the State, Governor Cuomo gave what will be the first of many addresses today, and this one was in Manhattan. And in it, Cuomo laid out an ambitious progressive social agenda focusing on his plan for free college tuition, criminal justice reform, women's rights, protecting immigrants, election reform, including early voting and same-day registration, as well as creating middle-class jobs as well. He also touched on his $10 billion plan to rebuild JFK Airport.
Last week, we announced a $10 billion plan for a new John F. Kennedy Airport. Queens will see 2 new airports because I'm from Queens.
Now, critics are already deriding his address, saying he's casting himself as a combination of Robert Moses, FDR, and Santa Claus, demanding a focus on job creation, not what they describe as spending money that taxpayers don't have. Andrew, he seems to be a lot more progressive than the guy that I remember not long ago. But you know what? He delivers on a lot of stuff. Look at the bridge, Tappan Zee, etc. I know the devil's in the details, but he's getting stuff built. He's getting stuff closed that was unpopular. He's getting money into hands that it wasn't before, setting himself up for something.
To be fair, Governor Cuomo has always been healthily left of center when it comes to social issues. That's almost
Gay marriage,
indisputable.
gun control.
Right. What the real concern is about fiscal policy. And, will he really pursue the millionaire's tax that Carl Hastie wants him to pursue in Albany? How progressive or how centrist will his economic policy be? And that may have a lot to do with where the money is coming from for all of these projects. That's really the big strike against his plans. Everything that he's laying out costs a ton of money. And much like the Tappan Zee Bridge, we have no idea where that money's coming from.
He does seem to be positioning himself, though, as a little bit on the progressive side. Bernie Sanders was there when he talked about the free tuition, and yet also the guy who can point to accomplishments, not just words.
Yeah, and I have to say hallelujah on the voting issue because it's desperately needed in New York State, which is a terrible record when it comes to voting. But I do think that he is trying to position himself. And interestingly, if this keeps up, we could see in 2020 another battle between 2 New Yorkers and Donald Trump and Andrew Cuomo. And I think it would be a fascinating battle of 2 guys from New York City.
Let me just give Governor Cuomo a quick attaboy. These are infrastructure projects that have been delayed for decades, put off, put down the road, and now they're falling apart. They don't reflect a 21st century America.
Can I ask you a question? What I've learned about with the Tappan Zee Bridge, and now it looks like JFK, is the dirty secret, unless there's some giant windfall from bringing, foreign profits that, like Trump's talking about, to get stuff built, you almost have to say, just build it and we'll figure out where the money's going to come from later on. I know that's irresponsible and the rest, but otherwise nothing ever seems to get built.
Well, I agree with you. It would be irresponsible to
that's what they're doing.
Obligate the state's taxpayers to a project of billions of dollars and not know where the money's going to come from. So,
don't you have to do that as much as it's reckless?
I wouldn't recommend it. There's a delicate balance between being aggressive, let the people know what you want to do, get everybody's.
But then you got to raise their taxes.
But first you need a consensus on what needs to be done, get everybody on board, and then the problem of finding the money is secondary. It's a big problem, but once you have the public on board as to the need for these infrastructure projects, just to get back and forth to these, to work, to fund, to play quality of life, plus the investment in our children.
But the dirty secret
is,
right? It's
an investment in our country and in our children and grandchildren's way of life.
Oh, I don't disagree. Every project that's been built is long overdue for safety and all the other practical reasons. But the one thing Cuomo's proven is, I don't know where the money's all coming from, but we're going to build it. And then later on, come complain to me. Tolls may go up on the TZ and all the rest, but I don't know. I've heard a lot of people talk about it. He's the only one getting it done.
Some of this stuff has appeared in State of the State addresses of Cuomo's before. The question is how much political capital, how much fight will they actually put behind this? It's easy to mention it in a big speech, but when you roll up your sleeves and see what actually happens in Albany, that's where the devil lies in these details.
Look at the Second Avenue subway. All right, coming up next, the fight to prevent Governor Cuomo from granting clemency to Judith Clark. That's the woman sentenced to 75 years for her role in that fatal Brinks robbery in Nanuet decades ago. Well, today, opponents took the battle to Albany, and we were there.